I really, really like what they're doing here. I'm taking notes for the future almost to bring back to the EU teams.
Right now, they are certainly a step ahead.
He's someone that deserves a lot more credit for what he's doing.
Welcome to Deserto's Curveball Review Show presented by Razer. Blitz ahead of the competition with the Razer Viper Ultimate. Now, we're back with our next episode coming off the back of the Reykjavik VALORANT Masters tournament. It's all come to an end and we've had a lot of fun watching all the action go down on the first big LAN event here in VALORANT history. And history was made across the board. And to talk about all of this with me is the fantastic Mitch and fRoD as we get into all of what we got to see. And guys, some of us made some very good predictions. Some of us went for a bit of EU bias, me and Mitch, and didn't work out so well for us, did it, mate?
No, it didn't. I mean, look, it was pretty close in the end. If we say how much we ended up losing by, well, at least for me, couple of rounds here or there, that's fine by me.
Yeah, a couple of rounds. Not for me, though, was it?
Hey, I mean, look, every single game was really close, right? Out of the 5 maps that Sentinels won, they were all by a couple rounds, you know, if not overtimes and whatnot. So it was pretty even. It just kind of goes to show maybe how Fnatic is kind of like a leap ahead of everyone in EU, but also how Sentinels is just consistent and strong. And even though maybe like the easy route or the easy choice for me to have picked them to win, it's kind of like they've shown that resilience, you know, like even almost losing in the qualifiers and everything like that. And it kind of almost doesn't really matter. They get stronger as the tournament goes and teams are throwing everything they have at them and it's not really working out in their favor to, like, you know, so it's like no matter what Fnatic did, Sentinel had some sort of an answer. And to me, that was probably like the really amazing part, to see them kind of answer back and show that experience and everything like that coming through.
And me, well, I went for Team Liquid, you know, and okay, they both went down to the lower bracket with Fnatic as well. Yeah, you laugh away, Mitch. Yeah, you got your Fnatic pick in there. You know, I really played into this full effect of like, oh yeah, you know, Jamppi's going to come through and deal the damage. He's had a bit more time with the team, and it wasn't ideal, especially when they came up against Fnatic. Like Fnatic, they did what they did best. But you know, I will say one thing, right? I wouldn't say I'm worried for Liquid, but I certainly expected more. Would you agree, Mitch?
I think so. I think for the top 2 teams coming in, like Liquid performed decently well, but I wanted to see them beat V1. That was like a benchmark for me, and I just don't think that they're up there like in the top 2. They made it through this tournament. A couple of teams had their off days, but honestly, reshuffle the brackets, run challengers again, and I think you're probably going to end up with Fnatic on top with Gambit or FPX.
Now we're going to look at the bracket, right, and just review everything that went down here. And remember, the thing here for Fnatic, who obviously made it to the grand finals, is they started further back than anyone else, right? They had to go for this extra round of games in here. And I would say that on its own was impressive. Okay, they went up against Sentinels very early on, fRoD, but they did show us that, okay, they've got the ability to be able to fight a tougher route, I would say, in that sense of having to show themselves and show more games.
Yeah, I mean, Fnatic had showed a lot of resilience in just everything that they were going through. I mean, so many games, so many matches. They played pretty much every region, and it's just one of these things that it's like they consistently came out on top. You know, obviously maybe not to, you know, Sentinels, but it's very hard to get to that stage and to kind of beat them. But in my opinion, they were the team that probably was able to put up the biggest and best fight towards Sentinels, which is what automatically makes them very good. But Sentinels is just very, very strong, man. I mean, it's just one of these teams that they just, no matter what, it's like all the players, but it kind of goes back to like even the highlighting of the talent. Like, look at someone like on Sentinels, they're highlighting TenZ, they're letting him go crazy with some of the agent picks. Like same with Durka on Fnatic. I think maybe that's where like other teams, like say Liquid for example, they kind of limited ScreaM playing on Sage constantly and all that. And even though he was probably one of the best players in the tournament, it's like you're sort of limited, you know. And I think that was another thing too, you know, because the individual talent on both sides, like Fnatic and Sentinels, was just able to really be like some sort of showcasing moment throughout the whole entire tournament.
Now, I do want to stay with this Sentinels topic for a little bit, because not only did they take the big win here, they didn't drop a single map, right? And that on its own, despite some of the games getting close and what you may look at it as, proved a point on that. Right now, they are certainly a step ahead. Not just like, it wasn't when I'm looking at their games of just them brute forcing their way through it, right? They had to fight back. They were going into crazy games, got into overtimes as well. This showed us more depth than maybe what we gave some of the NA teams credit for, Mitch.
100%. Yeah, I think when you look at Sentinels in this tournament, like V1 even as well, I just don't think they're up to the same caliber, certainly as Sentinels. They took the idea that, oh yeah, NA, they're just going to play double duelists, they're going to just run around, look for picks, and that's how they play. They pug it. They took that idea and they just tore it to shreds. Watching them play was a pleasure. In that finals especially, there were so many rounds when I was sitting in the green room with the other analysts and thinking, man, I really, really like what they're doing here. I'm taking notes for the future almost to bring back to the EU teams, right? Like, Sentinels, their game plan was there. They have insane individuals. They don't have a coach, right? ShahZaM is IGL. He's coach. He's the leader, the dad of the team. And he's also up there on the frags, man. He had some insane clutches throughout the tournament, insane individual rounds. I was really, really impressed by what Sentinels brought to the table, and I think that definitely they did a lot more in terms of the tactical department than a lot of EU fans, maybe myself included, would have given them credit for coming into the tournament.
I mean, the other thing too is like the depth of player pool that these guys have, because when you have someone like Sick that can play duelist, or he plays like a battle sage, or you have like ShahZaM who's not only the IGL like you mentioned, but also playing like Sova, and then on other maps like he can flex onto the Jet. Then you have TenZ who could just kind of play any duelist. I mean, there's so many different things. It almost felt like to me that Sentinels was just dominating in one style leading up to Iceland, and then when they, you know, they obviously like expecting to qualify to Iceland, that's when they busted out all the stops, you know, changing different compositions, mixing different things up, like bringing new things per map rather than having like similar agents for most of the maps, for example. So it was like a pleasure to see not only what they were doing individually, but also on the strategic department, from the strats and the execs that they had, but also the agent compositions, the players changing up some of the agents. And I think that that's what really allowed them to be very diverse and bring something new to the table when they're one of the most watched teams in the whole entire world, right? Yes. So it's like everyone, you could assume that people know their play style more than they do almost, right? So this was a very good showing on the tactical side to bring something completely new to the table that no one was really expecting, and the homework that they probably did not show up in what actually happened in the server.
And one thing, right, when you guys were there just talking about the agent composition side of things, I did an interview very early on when Nitro went to 100 Thieves, and I was talking to him, and he was basically saying how, like, any players that come into Valorant now, like, they can't just be specialized in one. They're going to have to be able to diversify and have this mix with it all. Do we think that this is just the sign of things to come? Do we kind of agree with that mentality going forward? Because obviously we even saw some teams who said they wouldn't use certain agents, put it into play.
Yeah, I think I'm with anyone that believes that you need depth in a game like this, and the fact that we have two new agents a new agent every 2 months pretty much proves that. We've had this conversation towards the start of Valorant saying, like, you know what, it's beta, there's not that many agents in there. Yeah, you can be the Jet, you can be the Raze, but when you add in more maps, more complexity, more agent comps, and obviously the rock, paper, scissors, and probably many more utensils thrown in there as we move throughout the metas, you are going to need to have that bit of depth there 100%. I don't think in a year you will not have players who are like, this is my agent, this is the one I play. It just won't be feasible.
Yeah, no, completely agree, mate. It's going to be very exciting as we see more agents get added to it. But I got a part for us to do now, right? We did our predictions when it came to the teams that we thought we'd see here. Now it's time for our VCT Stage 2 Master Surprise MVP with the Shock Dart presented by Razer. And I'm going to kick things off with here, guys, because I'm going to go for the easy route on all of this. My MVP for this is TenZ. Not only, obviously, because he just fragged out and does what he does, right? Because there was a lot of people on Twitter when we did the first show, and they were like, oh, TenZ, like, he's not just better, right? It's like, it would be fine. They would still have the same success even without him. No way. Like, this man is a difference maker on an individual level. Not just the plays he can make and the numbers he can put up, but just the way he does it, right? The big brain plays that come out at the same time. He's not just like a run and gun, just a superior fragger. Like, for me, it's just the guy who deserves it. So maybe not so much of a surprise, but some people out there were claiming that, you know, TenZ, whether he was in the team or not, Sentinels will still have the same success. After this kind of performance, after what he did in the server, I don't think so at all. fRoD, what are you thinking, though? Where are you going with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you there for sure, because I think that he was one of the guys that I think we all had our eyes on and kind of wanted to see what he was going to bring to Masters. But I'm going to have to go with ShahZaM here. I think what ShahZaM did, not only on the individual basis with Jett and Sova, for example, but the strategic side, the IGL side. I mean, this wasn't a situation where you just saw Sentinels just go out and just run over and dominate teams. I mean, obviously they had a couple games where they were doing like that, but their toughest opponents, say Fnatic, for example, I mean, it's like the big brain plays, the strategic side. I mean, in my opinion, it's more of like, you can obviously have TenZ go out and do work, but ShahZaM is the one that's like sending the pieces out, closing the rounds out, making those kind of calls. And I think that he's someone that deserves a lot more credit for what he's doing, not only for what he's produced in the server from the IGL side, but also individually incorporating someone like TenZ in there, calling strategies and agent compositions that just maximize everyone's potential on the team, and then him kind of fitting the role or maximizing where he may find an opportunity. So yeah, I think ShahZaM for me is kind of that guy that he's came out of this tournament as one of the top contenders, like in overall IGL and just playing and everything, versatility, everything.
Yeah, no, do you know what? I'd just add to that on the sense that for ShahZaM as well, right, was slowing down massively in CS. We weren't seeing him at the top levels, comes into Valorant and not only just reinvents himself as an IGL, but also, like you're saying, brings out these different plays and compositions that maybe a lot of us didn't expect from Sentinels. And he spoke big during the press conference and delivered on it. They came through as the overall winners. But Mitch, what's your pick, mate? Where you going?
So here's the thing, right? There's a couple of easy picks, but I heard the word surprise in there, so I can't go for your ScreaM, your Durka. And I've been thinking about it, mulling it over in my mind, and I wanted to go with Patafan because the performance that he put up for X10 was unbelievable. Like, they lost pretty much all their games. They weren't looking too good. Crazy Raccoons, he was showing up massively, but even against Vikings and Fnatic, I really enjoyed watching him play, and I felt like it was almost a one-man show, with the exception of Fox showing up every now and then. But I do also want to give a massive shout out to Lakia over on NUTURN. This guy impressed everybody. And I think when you talk about surprise MVPs, anybody who's familiar with the Korean scene won't come in and go, oh, Lakia did well, what a shock. But for the majority of the audience, your North Americans, the Turkish region, Brazil, Europe, they probably won't know Lakia all that much. And after this tournament, I guarantee he's going to be a player that the world is keeping an eye on.
Hey, in the first episode, you had him picked as the MVP.
Yes, I did.
Hey,
you know, you put an eye out. So if you're watching the show, you'll easily get some tips like this on who to watch.
There you go. That's what it's all about, right? That's what we do. Now, moving on to a point we have to touch on, right? Second place here for Fnatic. This team came through, and actually I'll take a moment to say, I think they did very well is like their entrances, you know, their celebrations. They were very comical with it. Boaster giving us a bit of everything with it. There were so many times, right, where I'm watching this go down, and it's like, the game's ended, okay, they got another win, I'm happy he's doing well, and then they just make me crack up laughing, right? They had the social media, the presence locked down in terms of everyone was talking about it, and I'm down to see a bit of personality shown, right, throughout all of these kind of things. But one thing that we knew we would always get with Fnatic, right, is a team that can fight. But I came into this when we did the first episode, and Mitch, I know we kind of looked at it when we were talking about the LAN side of things, is other than Boaster, no one on that team had actual, like, big LAN experience. This was a huge amount of stress put on a team that has a lot of talent on it.
Yeah, it was definitely, and I think honestly the lack of a crowd probably helped them a lot because then it feels much more like a studio event, as we were saying the other week, versus the hard, you know, you've got 10,000 people in front of you, good luck, have fun. So definitely in stress, it was a little bit less than a normal LAN, so to speak, but at the same time, flying out there, seeing your competition, that's something that can definitely make you a little bit shy, make you hide behind the computer screen a bit. But we didn't see that from Fnatic. We saw Doma getting up and rezzing up his teammates after they win. We saw them replicate an aeroplane. Like, it was beautiful, especially to send NA home. That was beautiful stuff. And I think that's a gorgeous thing when you see, like, we're coming into this event, we're questioning, like, where's their confidence going to be at? Like, are they going to be in the right mindset? And as soon as they pull out one of those celebrations, I'm like, all right, yeah, they're in the right mindset for sure.
Oh, even just walking in, and it was kind of one of those things that you knew these guys are ready, but it's also, it kind of speaks volumes to Boaster, right? Just like, you say how he talks about his LAN experience being the only one, he's also the in-game leader. I mean, just him being the kind of person that he is, being charismatic and being a solid leader, allows for the other guys on his team to kind of just take the edge off potentially. So maybe guys like Durka and all that, they're able to just be more comfortable around him and in these environments just simply because of his presence and his leadership style. So I think if anything, Boaster just had like a really great presence. And you know, even obviously everyone like the fans, us and the other teams he competed against, they probably saw a great side of it. But can you imagine being on his team, right? Like you get to actually firsthand benefit from this 24/7. So I think that, you know, he deserves a lot of credit for how he was able to enable his players to showcase their maximum potential at this tournament.
And we gotta keep talking, fRoD, about Durka here, because this man, right?
Yeah.
Not only does he just pop off and look great, he is a player what I feel like is only going to get better from here, right? He's one of these ones where I look at and think for the future, he is just going to grow into an absolute monster, like one of the future superstars we have.
Yeah, and this is kind of brings me back to what I was saying about like maybe Liquid, for example. Like what you see clearly with Fnatic is Boaster is utilizing the talent that he has and maximizing them on some of the agents, for example. Like Durka's just going hard with the Jet and the Op and doing different things, allowing him to play loose within a certain system and then maximizing the individual talent that he's got on the team. Because if not, like, you know, Dirk is so good, you don't want to limit him, right? So I think when you look at like the Liquid side, for example, when they're kind of limiting, maybe focusing too much on composition, agent necessity, over gunplay, over the talent, over that superstar that you may have, or maybe you don't know that you have in someone like Durka. You need to at least give them that ability to kind of see like what they have in that potential, because even though the meta and the abilities are something that's very, very important in Valorant, you know, gunplay kind of does reign supreme, because if you see what, you know, someone like ScreaM could do on something like Sage, I mean, it's unbelievable. And you wouldn't think Sage can hard carry in this kind of meta, but you put ScreaM on it, you can. Maybe if you throw TenZ on it, you probably can too, right? So this is where it's like, why make it harder for those guys, right? Like give them the agent that allows them to just absolutely dominate the scene. And that was kind of a little disappointing for me, where we got to see ScreaM versus other top talents like Durka and TenZ, for example, and he was maybe more limited in having an agent that he had to play a little bit more reserved, where some of these guys are just styling and wilding on him, you know.
And Mitch, right, one thing we still, when you're talking about Durka, is we've got to look at like the MVP performances he put in there, right? This is something where again you come back to thinking, okay, yes, it's not a crowd on this LAN environment, but he didn't seem phased by anything here, right? We talked about the celebration, talked about what goes on, but this is a man that picked up big MVPs from the talent that were looking at it all, right?
I think not only that, it's also the depth that was displayed by him. I think that Sentinels put a lot of work into dealing with Durka, certainly in the early stages of rounds, and the adaptation from Durka to no longer play. I mean, we saw maps where he didn't pick up the operator even once, didn't attempt to go for those dual. Sentinels reciprocated with TenZ, I think, on the Haven, the first Haven they played. He picked up the op once, got a pick onto Durka down middle on Haven, and that was it. Op was gone from that point because they lost the round, or they lost a lot of weapons and had to rebuy, and they decided to stay away from it. And again, a sign of a close game that they didn't want to just risk the economy. But the important thing for me was that Durka put up, firstly, insane stats, considering if you look at the grand final, on the defense he was weak. I will give you that. On split especially, he had a really, really rough time. But on the attack, he was sacrificing himself for the team. He was playing Jet as you should, as I think ScreaM was probably the first one to show that within Europe. When you're picking up Jet, you're not playing the operator, you're dashing in, you're giving the openings for your team to follow in and trade you, or maybe for you to trade them depending on where the enemy flicks their crosshair. And when you're in that role, you are not expected to win opening duels. I heard some criticism of him like, oh, he was like 5 for 10 in opening duels. It's like, yeah, if you look at how he plays, that makes a lot of sense. He should be. If you're playing against a top 5 team in the world, you're dashing into the site and you're killing 2 of them, there's a big problem there with the other team, not with you. That shouldn't happen. But the trade was always there. We had someone like Magnum up behind to grab that extra frag and put them into the position where they can actually own the site and play off of that. And the fact that playing that kind of Jet, he still put up huge numbers, is a testament to how solid of a player he is and how selfless that he just doesn't care about his stats, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, my one thing to say about that is, you know, as being like a kind of a sniper myself when I played the game in CS and stuff, like when you're on the offensive side, it could be a little bit easier sometimes, simply because you follow a strategy, right? And you follow like an exec and your IGL is there. But when you're on defense, it's kind of like you have to have a little bit more of a feel for the game, especially when you're being countered so much, especially when you face a team earlier in their tournament, especially when you have a team like Sentinels that comes from a region that we play nothing but jet mains and like Wardell and Oppers like that. So we kind of have the right idea of how to go against that. When you're a player that's being looked at, studied, and watched, and kind of being countered in some sort of way, especially on the defensive side, you got to get yours. You got to start off in different places. You got to be more unpredictable, start off on different sides, and you know, you just can't be that stagnant. So I think if anything, my one thing that I would say is on that, you know, defensive side, just get a little bit more loose, especially out of the gate. You know, from the blue wall, take a little bit more chances in different sites. Even if you're playing A on one map, start off on B, then rotate over, vice versa. You know, just kind of keep the other team guessing, because at the end of the day, they can't have full awareness of you across the whole entire map. But in this sort of case, you know, maybe it's like he's listening to the IGL tell him where he should start, where it's kind of like you got to go on feel and kind of like, I think they're going to go heavy here, heavy there, you know, and kind of take those early aggressions, dash out, and then let the round develop after that, hopefully getting that
James,
one pick.
you know, is that not the most North American piece of advice you've ever heard? Play a little bit more loose.
Hey, man.
I agree
the thing
with you,
is,
though,
this game kind of allows you, though, especially in the blue wall side of it, because, you know, in other games, we never had those blue walls, right? Here, it's like you can just take that shot and get away. So it's not even, obviously, you know, getting aggressive is more the answer, but I'm really more talking about those first 5-10 seconds, just kind of like give a little bit more aggression, because if you establish presence somewhere, then they're going to have to respect the opposite side or whatever side.
You know, I think we actually saw that happen. Just a matter of Sentinels being so prepared. Like, there was a round on going back to Split where he did have a tough time. We saw the operator come out, he goes for a pick, he falls back. Next round, I'm not sure if it was exactly the next round, but shortly afterwards, goes to Bladestorm, dashes down mid, looks to kill them in sewers before they even get out of spawn. Like, he was trying to innovate and catch them off guard, and I think he got away with that, both of those scenarios. But then there were a number where, like, he would try to get that little bit of space and they're there, or he would try to play a bit more passive as they wanted aggression elsewhere, or play information on another side of the map, and Sentinels took the fight to him, caught him on the back foot, tripped him up. Like, I think they put a lot. I haven't watched the VOD back, but I expect to see it even more the second time around, into how much they looked into getting Fnatic on the back foot, and Durka in particular, making sure that he just couldn't feel comfortable in the series. And that's another thing that will fly under the radar for a lot of EU viewers, who will just come out of it going, oh, they're just pugging, they're just aiming, they just got more kills. And it's like, no, they actually played beautiful Valorant. And whereas I would look at a lot of North American teams and say, don't copy that if you want to make a Valorant team, I would look at Sentinels and say, definitely take as much from them as you can.
Yeah, that preparation and hard work certainly paid off, right? Having a good detailed look at it, and it's those little details that often the community may miss at times, right? By not really being fully aware of it and just kind of throwing out comments like it could be just, oh yeah, it's just like needless aggression with it all. But the next team we got to talk about, and it was my my prediction when we came into this, is Team Liquid, because I had high hopes for them. They only walked away with a one-match win in the end, right? And then they ended up being eliminated by Fnatic and not having a chance to move forward. I expected so much more in that Mitch, man. When I looked at that matchup, I was like, oh, cool, this is going to be really close. This is going to be a tight one. Obviously, I was thinking, like, it's time for ScreaM to pop off. And certainly individually, he was up there. And they had 3 players within the top 10 in terms of kill-death ratio, right? But that still wasn't enough. This was still a Liquid that has its flaws.
Yeah, I think at the same time, I would say Liquid did very well versus Fnatic in that they made it double digits. They made it competitive. On Bind especially, like when you make the decision that you're going to play Bind against Fnatic, you're in a lot of hot water. And I think we even saw that in the grand finals where Sentinels had to play being a BO5, and it was very, very tight. Fnatic are one of the best Bind teams in the world, and Liquid managed to take them the distance, with the exception of a couple of mess ups. And although I think Liquid won the pistol round in the second half, but they then lost the follow-up immediately. So in terms of the early half of an MR12, they lost, like, I think 5 out of 6 rounds in the beginning of each half. That puts you, or beginning of both halves together, that puts you in a very bad position when your opponent only needs to get 13, and before you even get a buy round, they're on 5-1. So yeah, I think Liquid did decently well, But it's that version 1 game, man. That's what really hurts me. They should have taken that across the line. Losing to Fnatic 2-0, that's acceptable for any team. It damn well nearly happened to Sentinels twice, I suppose, when it comes to the BO5 and the BO3 they played. But V1, come on, Liquid. You gotta be taking the trophy against them.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think that V1 deserved to win that game. I mean, on paper, you might think that Liquid was the favorite going into it, but I think V1 had the advantage there because there was a little bit of arrogance, I think, on Liquid's behalf of thinking that, you know, NA teams are predictable in the sense that, you know, why would a team like Sentinels not bring everything that they had held, you know, into this tournament? V1, like right out the gate, they can't be predictable when you have a ringer. Like right out the bat, anything that you've researched beforehand is irrelevant. So you can't predict anything like that. So that's where I thought that V1 had the advantage, because if Liquid's MO is to play meta and play comp over playing the strengths that they have on the team, they're going to lose against teams that they have nothing against, because they rely too heavily on some of the homework and some of their research, and they don't give enough faith and power into what the ability that they can do individually. And I think that that's where they could have taken advantage and led the pace with V1 that was maybe seen as handicap, but coming into this, but they weren't, because they obviously have a good IGO and a good strategy coming into it. But Liquid should not have. I think if anything, they're probably leaning too heavily on the meta and the comp side and not allowing some of these players to just go hard and compete, you know?
Yeah, and actually one point, and Mitch, we'll know this really well, right? When we always talked about Liquid, it was like the preparation they put in was Sliggy's ideas of changing comps up and how we want to approach the game, right? And this mindset going into it. Something was still just a miss there, because I know the individuals come up to us like, look, Jamppi in there, ScreaM, Link as well. Link's moments definitely deserve a special mention as well. But is that still not enough for you? Like, that's where I'm worried for these guys, because they like need to be able to adapt further.
Yeah, so the reason why I'll say something about it is because I have like firsthand experience in some cases of teams that want to copy that, at least in the NA side, that want to go that route, what we call like that Na'Vi playstyle that's super slow, and just that focus of comp and meta over gunplay. And you know, at the end of the day, you're not taking advantage of who you have in the server. You're trying to put credence over like the agents, that the agents and the composition has more value than the person operating the agent, and that should not be true, because the person that's behind it is who makes the magic. And you have someone like ScreaM, it's like you can't just like he's a guy that doesn't fit in meta. He's what you define meta. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I think it's a little bit too much of a focus on the strategic side, and people trying to imitate that rather than just kind of, you got Jamppi, you got ScreaM. I mean, let them just do their thing.
I think the other problem I have with Team Liquid right now is that they feel almost like reminiscent of G2 back in the day when they were successful. That I think what we're missing there, when we look at some of the best teams, at least within Europe, we're talking about Boaster. He has now definitely defined himself as one of the best IGLs out there within Europe, probably within the world. When we look at Angel, same thing can be said. Those, in my opinion, are the two top teams in EU right now. For Liquid, we don't have that tried, tested, proven IGL. We haven't got somebody. Matter of fact, they got rid of the guy who was IGLing for them and brought in someone that didn't even know the game. Like, and don't get me wrong, Jamppi's been performing very well, but for me, there's always going to be that missing element. You have somebody in the background like Sliggy who knows the game inside out, but all manner of preparation. If you don't have that IGL who's flexible enough to adapt in the game, you are going to be screwed, especially when you come up against a team like V1, where that preparation, as you said, fRoD, goes out the window when they bring in Jammies, who, by the way, had a fucking fantastic tournament. I loved watching Jammies. I'm really happy that he was able to perform, because James, you'll remember him from Team Smoke Easy way back in the day, back in beta. And he faded off our radar, at least being in Europe. You know, he has been around the NA scene for sure, but not at the top level. He comes into Masters. He has a great set of series. Don't look at the Liquid one. But other than that, he played absolutely fantastic. I loved watching him. But that's the thing for me. That's where Liquid need to improve for me, is to actually get the most value out of that support system they have in the background. They need to bring in someone that has that IGLing experience, that has the adaptability, because in my opinion, that's where Fnatic takes the lead over them, is in round to round reads and being able to adapt in the game. Fnatic have that with Boaster. They have that with the setup and the structure that they have, whereas for Liquid, If Sliggy could talk to them every single round, this could be probably the best fucking team in the world. But they can't. Yeah. So now we're left in this position where, what are you doing when things go wrong? Calling a tech pause or attack pause. You don't have that many of them, and then you can be in some pretty hot water.
Yeah. And so one thing to say about like even like V1, like they got someone like Jammies, who I was with him with Beast Coast for a few months, and I got to see what a star he is. Like they play to his strengths, you know, like they put him on Viper and put him on different things, and that just a different stylistic point of view from like maybe the NA side or Vanity's POV. Like what I'm trying to say, like they played to his strengths. They didn't just stick him into what they thought worked. They, you know, figured out what he's really good at, which is playing these off agents, playing Viper, things like that, and just kind of forced him down and made him unpredictable simply by playing to his strengths.
Yeah, and me and Mitch, we got to enjoy, right, Jammy's moments where he first showed us Viper beyond where people were just not using Viper. So he definitely deserves an honourable mention there as well. But it is time for us. Oh, go on, Mitch. Go. Quick.
I was going to say, I'll never forget the day, man, because that's where I fell in love with Viper. You'll remember we were covering a game of Split. We lost our minds when the pick came in. We were like, what? Yeah. Whoa! People actually play this agent? All right, let's see what you got, Jammies. And then his name was forever ingrained in my mind when he had these one-ways. He had just everything he was doing with her was fantastic to watch. That was the day I fell in love with Viper, so I'll always remember Jammies. I'm so happy. I'm so proud of him, seeing him out there representing the beta folks.
Oh yes, Jammies did it for us for sure. But it is time for us to get on to our next segment, and this is a good one. It's time for Run It Back, where we're going to look at the most memorable / clutch moment of the VCT Stage 2 Masters presented by Razor. This is your Run It Back, and I'm going to kick things off again because mine's maybe not a clutch moment, but mine's going to be the entertainment moment. We already touched on Fnatic just a little bit, right? But they gave a send-off to Liquid when they eliminated him. You never want to eliminate your fellow European team, right? They had to do it. It had to go down like that. But they gave him the respectful one because we've had the jokey ones. We had the NUTURN one, right, where they're cutting Vanity's little ears off, for example. We had all the fun ones where the revives are coming through and stuff, and the sending the first NA team home for Fnatic. But, like, they gave just a respectful sign-off to Liquid, like, sorry we had to do you like that, but you're gone. And that just sticks in my mind completely of, like, respect to your fellow European teammates that you've played against loads of times, right? You've had all these matches across all of it in there. So I like that one. That's always going to stick in my mind. And so will a lot of those celebrations. I definitely want to see some more of that across all the events going forward. But Mitch, where are you going with this one? What's your Run It Back moment?
For my Run It Back moment, I'm going to have to pull out a bang, a smack, a wallop, and a ShahZaM. Because it was ShahZaM going away with a two-man spray down, I guess we'll call it. He was concussed. He was able to take headshot after headshot, showing his insane flick ability, showing his versatility, and showing that he's there to do more than just lead verbally. He's there to do it on the server as well.
Now, fRoD, what about you? Where are you going with your one?
Yeah, so originally I was going to go with my North Americans and V1 just simply because of how they showcased what they were going to do. And, you know, if they would have gotten top 3, I would have think that would have been like one of the biggest surprises of the tournament. But I got to go with my boomers over with NUTURN. I mean, the way that solo parry, the way that they were able to showcase what they were able to do down one map, kind of showing that resilience to come back. I mean, obviously they kind of got destroyed to get sent home out of the tournament, but I think just them beating V1, that secondary North American team that people did not really expect but took out Liquid, it's kind of one of these things that just seeing NUTURN being able to topple them, go that far with that experience, to me that was one of those things that was just a pleasure to watch, because it was able to bring in a lot of people from different areas that you're able to see like how talented some of these guys are. I mean, guys like Solo Perry, these are absolute legends in the FPS scene. So for us, you know, see the Koreans just go out there and ball out. I mean, it was for me, it was awesome to see the younger players in the scene get to see someone like Solo, who I competed against, kind of, and seeing the magic and the strengths that he can do, because, you know, it's like, it's unbelievable. I would never have expected them to beat V1. I really had V1 like as a top 3 finish, and the fact that NUTURN was able to do that with down a map, I think that was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And just kind of took all the air out, unfortunately, for V1. But wow, NUTURN, really did a good job there.
The experience, right? It showed itself up there, and the one thing I know it said in the ending, right, that they're potentially going to retire. I really hope they don't retire just yet. I'd love to see like one more last run, get them another way through, right? But I can understand it when you've played that high level for so long, like. fRoD, both me and you are well retired by now, right? But when these guys are still doing it, it kind of gives you that thought of like, oh man, like they really got it all going on for them. So yeah, I like that. Coming in as a run it back.
And the one thing that I love about it too is that they're all still involved in the scene. So even if Solar retires, I hope he go back to his old position, which was the coach of NUTURN. So I really want them to just continue to be involved, because I think that that's just going to foster growth in their scene. So I think that for me, that's something that I really want to see, and I'm really glad to see that kind of come out from them.
Oh yes, ultimate respect to those guys. But we are at the end of another show here. This has been Desserto's Curveball review show presented by Razor, and we have had a lot of fun looking back at some of the moments that just came out of the VC2 Stage 2 Masters event, our first LAN event, and some huge history here for Valorant.